Hey, what's up everybody? It's time to compound here. So most people underestimate just how far €200 a month can really go. But what if you invested that at 10% return? Well, in this video, we're going to find out exactly how much money you could have using the magic of compound interest. So, let's talk about it. Alright, so to start off, the next few minutes are probably going to sound pretty obvious, because I need to explain why saving in the bank is not a good idea anymore, and how starting small buy consistently. Investing that money has the potential to turn into hundreds of thousands of euros. And then we'll look at some real-life examples so you can see exactly what I mean. So first, why is saving in the bank not a good idea anymore? Well, firstly, inflation. If we take €1,000 for example, and we leave it in the bank for 1 year at the end of that year, we're losing at least 2% of that because of inflation. But now, let's flip the switch and talk about what happens when we start investing instead. Here we can see that we are re-putting in €200 each month or €2,400 a year into a long-term investment that earns us 10% per year, which gets us around €240 of dividends or capital gains. And if we did this consistently for the next 30 years, well, in this case, we'd end up with nearly €500,000. That's right, with only €200 a month invested at 10%. We could turn our €86,000 into €500,000. Or another way to think about this is that we could make another €414,000 passively. If you want to try this out for yourself, you can use any kind of online compound interest calculator. Just search Google for one and play around with the numbers until your heart's content. However, here's the best part. The longer you invest, the less important each individual year becomes. For example, here we can see that the largest yearly gain was back in 2023, where we made €24,289. But as time went on, each year we made less and less and less and less. And eventually, after 30 years, we're only making around €240 per year. So even if something were to happen and you were unable to contribute for a couple of months or maybe even a couple of years, it wouldn't be the end of the world. You could just get back on track and continue as normal. Now, in terms of what to invest in, I recommend starting with a global ex-US index fund like VUA. This gives you exposure to some of the biggest growing companies in the world, and is also a great place to begin for new investors. Although before we go into that, like and subscribe for the YouTube algorithm. It genuinely helps out, and I appreciate each and every single one of you who does. Now, moving along, it's also important to mention that there's two different types of investing: passive income and active investing. Passive investing is exactly what we've been talking about. You buy and hold onto a diversified portfolio of investments for a long period of time, and hopefully you make money in the long run. Active investing, on the other hand, is trying to beat the market by buying and selling various assets at different times, hoping to outperform everyone else. However, as Warren Buffett once said, the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. I personally believe that this is the best mindset to take when approaching long-term investing. We're not trying to get rich quick. We're not trying to outperform anyone else. We're simply trying to grow our money as slowly and steadily as possible. And in terms of how to actually invest, my recommendation is to start by automating it as much as possible. Open up an account with a broker like Freedom24, link in the description, and set up a recurring deposit that invests a set amount of money each month. Yes, it would be nice to get involved in some more advanced strategies like dollar cost averaging or tax loss harvesting. But in reality, you could just buy and hold a lo-fi broad market index fund, and over the long term, you'll probably end up doing just fine. And finally, let me show you a few examples of companies that have done exactly this. Now, just before we jump into this, it's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future results. These are only a few examples of companies that have done really well over the last 10, 20 years. But that doesn't mean that they'll necessarily continue to do so well in the future. That being said, the S&P 500 index fund has returned an average of 10.5% over the last 20 years. So based on that, let's say that's what we're working with. Let's start with Apple. Now, if you had bought in around February 2003 at the start of their rise to popularity, a €200 investment at the time would be worth over 6,300 euros today. That's right, a €200 investment is now worth over 6,000 euros. If we add a second zero to that, then we've got 630,000 euros. And if we add a third zero, well, that's 6.3 million euros. And that's the kind of money we're working with here. Now obviously, this isn't realistic, because you're not going to buy Apple stock all at once. But if we go back to our original graph and we adjust it to reflect this, we can see that with €200 a month invested in Apple over 30 years, we'd have around 200,000 euros. Next, we've got Microsoft. If we do the same thing with Microsoft, a €200 investment today would be worth over 1,000 euros. To zeros, we've got 100,000 euros. And 3 zeros, 1 million euros. So just like with Apple, if we were to invest €200 a month into Microsoft for 30 years, we'd end up with around 200,000 euros. Finally, let's look at the S&P 500 index fund. If we buy VUAA, which tracks the S&P 500, a €200 investment today would be worth over 6,200 euros. 2 zeros, 620,000 euros. And 3 zeros, 6.2 million euros. So if we invested €200 a month into SPY for 30 years, we'd end up with around 200,000 euros. Now again, these are just a few examples. But the key takeaway is that investing as little as €200 a month into a variety of different assets over the course of 30 years could potentially turn into hundreds of thousands of euros. And with that being said, that's a look at how you could turn €200 a month into 400,000 euros. Start today, and your future self will thank you. Remember, investing involves risk. Past performance is not indicative of future results. And this is not financial advice. Like and subscribe for more smart money moves. Check out these videos here. Thanks for watching. And until next time,